Hey there, Bear Club! At the Mama Bear Initiative, we explore how to protect ourselves so we can protect our cubs, the people who depend on us. Join us and get the confidence you need to stay safe, make good choices, and protect yourself and those you care about. Let's go!
Hello and welcome back to the Mama Bear Initiative podcast. I'm Stephanie Dunham.
I'm Evelyn Mason.
I'm Rochelle Knapp.
And today's episode is part 2 of Confrontation. Reasons people don't, reasons why we should, and how to do it. So the first episode, we talked about the first 2 parts. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to start the last part, which there's a lot to say on how to go about confronting a person.
Right.
Because it has to be done a certain way for it to matter.
Right.
Because if you're doing this, as we talked about in the last episode, of the main reason is because the relationship matters and is worth fighting for, that means that you need to go about it in a certain way.
Right.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. So, Rochelle, last episode you were talking about how I brought up the whole breaking things thing.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about how that was for you on the receiving end of me bringing that up.
Sure, Steph. As I mentioned in the last episode, I'm in a place in my life where I'm trying to mature and be a better person. And so when you were telling me that, it was painful, but I received it in a way that was, I could process it and understand it, and not feel overwhelmed by the idea of changing. There was a principle of negligence and a level of not caring about other people's property, which led me to not pay attention to what I was doing in the moment.
Right. But how did it feel for me to bring that up to you?
It was painful, but...
Like, how was I towards you?
You were very kind and very patient and helped me understand clearly what you were saying without me feeling worse about it.
Yeah.
You made it very easy to receive, basically.
Yeah, that's good. I think the idea of we're addressing a problem, you're not the problem, but your behavior needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think one of my pet peeves in life is if you lie, you're a liar.
Oh, yeah.
Or if you steal, you're a thief.
Yep.
Okay, now I'm going to say that there probably is room for that kind of thinking if the problem is chronic and the person never changes.
Right.
I think if it's like a clinical problem, like this person has a compulsion to steal, like what's that one, kleptomania?
Yeah,
Right. Yep.
that's it.
If someone is diagnosable as a kleptomaniac, then yes, they're a thief. But if a person steals once, I don't know if I could go as far as saying you're a thief, as in branding them for their life
Right.
as a thief, especially if they want to change.
Yes, yes. And that sort of thinking can really get in deep, and especially if it starts when you're very young and you don't have defenses against that, especially if it comes from like a parent or someone who really has a lot of say in your life. There's a tendency to, if somebody does bring up you're doing this bad thing or, this harmful thing, there can be a tendency to go, yeah, there I go again because I'm a bad person.
Right. Right. And people get involved in self-fulfilling prophecies if they get branded
right
as something. You're a thief, so I'm a thief. I might as well go steal something.
Yeah.
That has its own brand of hopelessness, too, because it's something I experienced as a child. Being defined by someone else as someone bad makes you feel hopeless and desperate. Because, like you were saying, you have no defense against that as a child.
Right.
So you have to figure out as an adult just how to separate your behavior from who you are as a person, which is extremely difficult to do.
Right.
If you weren't trained to do that as a child.
Yeah, especially if you continue to carry that, but you try to put on a different face, a different persona to the public, but there's still that shame-filled person hiding in the shadows. And for someone to take the time to say, you're valuable. You are precious. You matter. I care about you. I care about you enough to confront this behavior that you have that is hurting me, that is hurting others. Someone who cares enough to separate those two things out. I'm not my behavior. When someone says you're not your behavior in some way, now I have hope.
Right. And for going back to the idea that, I mean, yeah, there are people who are diagnosable
Right.
as narcissistic or as narcissists or as kleptomaniacs or any number of whatever the diagnoses are these days.
Right.
Yes, that can happen. But for the most part, people aren't their behavior because they can and want to change.
Right.
So for myself, I remember as a kid lying a lot. And now, at the time, I've heard this on something that I was listening to related to trauma. Kids in trauma who lie are trying to protect themselves.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Okay,
Yep.
so that, if we take the whole if you lie, you're a liar thing, right? You could say, because I lied as a child, I am a liar, right? But there was a point in my life, somewhere in my late 20s, early 30s, where my Christianity had gotten a hold of me enough that I realized that lying was not a good thing.
Right.
And that's something
Right.
I didn't want to do. And I actually reversed course on that whole thing because I wanted to be a person of virtue and I wanted to be a person of integrity. And people who have integrity don't lie.
Right.
And the reason that I lied is because I was afraid of getting hurt.
Yeah.
Right. So it was about getting out of trouble. But I even did it into my adulthood, into my 20s, because I didn't know any better.
Right.
But then I changed. So now I'm in my 50s. I don't lie, period.
Right.
So am I still a liar by that concept?
No.
I would say no,
No.
because I was able to change.
Right.
So we have to be able to and willing to look at the other person's humanity
Yes.
and see them as a person and not make the frustration we feel personal about them.
Yes.
Yes.
We need to look at their behavior.
Yeah. And also, humbly looking at myself too. Like, if I am really in a bad mood and I'm really feeling ticked off about their behavior or whatever, probably not a good time to bring it up.
Yeah. It's rarely a good time when you're really angry to tell somebody how you really feel about what they're doing. Because oftentimes we say things like, you always this and you never that.
Yep,
Yes.
yep, which is not true.
Which is rarely true.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it could be true, but yeah, almost never. It's like coming in swinging, causing more destruction. Even if you're right, air quotes, you're wrong.
Yeah, if my husband does something that ticks me off, if I'm like, bah, 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 that rarely goes well.
Yeah.
Because he's like, bah, 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 back at me. And I'm like, well, what did we resolve? Nothing.
Nothing.
Although
Yeah.
it did feel good in the moment to be like, bah, bah, bah.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a release valve, but then you feel bad.
Right.
Because it's like,
Saying you got to go back and you
wrong
got to
thing.
apologize.
Yep.
It's just not worth it.
You can't put it back once it's out.
Right.
Dang it.
One of my goals, if I ever get married again, is to learn good communication and learn to control emotions and know when the right time is to talk about stuff, because I did not have a good marriage the first time. And there was a lot of emotional turmoil and upheaval constantly going on. There was zero good communication. And I've had a lot of time to reflect back on that, and I've grown a lot since then. The importance of communication in any relationship is just vital, but especially I think in a marriage, because there's so much more at stake
Yeah.
to lose. And I think if you can both be mature and know when the right time is to discuss something that's a problem, it may not go how you want it to go, but it will definitely go better than it would if you're both angry or very emotional or whatever is happening in the moment.
Right.
Yeah. And I think letting go of the idea that it has to be perfect as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's everybody's calm and you see an opportunity, it's the right time, and you're doing it with the right heart, In fact, that was a way that I was able to do this sort of thing recently and to confront is let go of any perfectionism and looking for the right time and then just going ahead and going for it.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things here that I think we need to go over, that I think there's a process that I do that I feel like would be beneficial. So you guys okay with me just sort of
Yeah.
explaining how I get to actually bringing something up to someone?
Yeah, go
Yeah,
for it.
sounds good.
I rarely, if it's something serious, I rarely confront the person right away about it. Now, my husband being the exception, because we're both pig-headed firstborns. My temper tends to flare more with him than anybody else.
Yeah.
Right. But we are trying to work on not necessarily reacting in the moment to whatever. And part of that is really understanding where he's coming from, or him understanding where I'm coming from. I think a lot of the temper flaring, it has to do with misunderstanding.
Yeah.
But the only way that we can figure that out is by having a conversation,
Right.
a confrontation. And so when I say confrontation, I don't mean that I'm going to get in somebody's face and I'm going to yell at them about how terrible they are and how much they hurt me.
Right.
Yeah.
What I mean is I'm going to bring a problem up to them. I'm going to make the gesture. I'm going to be the one, because they're not likely to do it themselves. And this is really about what is hurting me and ultimately our friendship
Yeah.
or marriage or whatever. So usually the first thing that happens is somebody will say something or do something, and I'll have that gut feeling that you talked about in the last episode, that something's not right.
Yeah.
Something feels really off
Yeah.
about what that person just did and said. Now, sometimes I will say, that was weird. Why would you say that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But that's at a certain comfort level in our friendship,
Right.
you know, and it really just sort of depends on the person and the timing. And if it made me angry, typically I don't go with discussing it in the moment if it's bringing about some kind of an emotional reaction.
Right.
I need to think about the emotional reaction. Like,
Yeah.
what exactly was it that bothered me?
Right.
So typically what I'll do is I'll spend some time examining what actually happened, what I felt about it, and why whatever it was that happened was wrong
Yeah.
or hurtful or whatever.
So it's sort of examining, being thoughtful, introspective.
Right. And that usually gives me enough time and space to really come to a decent conclusion about what went on that hurt me. The next thing I tend to do is I take some time to examine myself for any hypocrisy.
Right.
If I was to speak up,
Yeah.
would that put me in a position where I'm being a hypocrite?
That's a big deal.
Yeah, because you can't, I mean, Jesus talked about that whole principle of not looking at someone's speck in their eye without examining the log in your own.
Yes.
So what he's really talking about is hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Like, you can't clearly see someone else's problem if you're doing the same thing,
Right.
Right.
right? And I take some time to really think about that, because if I want to actually be helpful and have a beneficial conversation, I don't want it to come back to me, well, why are you picking on me? You do the same thing.
Yeah.
That's not going to get us anywhere.
Right.
And if I find any hypocrisy in how I'm feeling, and if bringing it up would be hypocritical, then I usually don't. And then I have to examine myself and then make my own changes for my own behavior. Because once
Yeah.
I'm aware of some hypocrisy in myself, I usually feel like I need to do something about that. Now, if I've passed through that step, right, I typically will think about, what exactly do I want to say? What's the most essential things?
Right.
What's going to be the most helpful thing to say to this person? Because the idea is to help them understand the problem and offer solutions, right?
Right.
Right.
And, you know, I don't go into it feeling like I know everything about the other person's motivations. So I'll concoct some questions. Like, you did this thing. Could you tell me why? because whatever it is they say to that is going to help me figure out what to say next.
Right.
But I'll usually have a list of things in my head that, ways to respond to. If this is the reason why they did this, then this will be a helpful thing to say.
Right.
And so, the humility aspect also comes into play here, because I shouldn't go at confronting someone feeling like I have all the answers.
Right. It's a superiority. Yeah.
Right. No superiority. We're going to be on equal footing. I'm going to bring this thing to you. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. And I have interest in your self-examination's results. Like if I ask you a question, that's time for you to examine yourself and think about why you did X thing and give me a reasonable answer. And then we can go from there. Right. But I will rehearse those kinds of conversations in my head. I'll think about all the possible permutations. Now, if I've gotten to know somebody pretty well, I can usually figure out why they did something.
Right.
But I'm still going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm still going to ask them. I'm not going to assume just because I feel like I know that person well enough to kind of guess at why they did this thing.
Yeah, and that's so important to not just assume.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I want the other person's humanity to feel my love.
Right.
Yeah.
And my care. I don't want them to feel like I'm better than them and I'm telling them what to do. And I want them to change to benefit me, because that's not the point.
Right.
Yeah.
Finally, I'll pick a time. Generally, there's not really ever a great time to bring something up.
Right.
But there are better times
Yes.
than others. So, for example, right before bed isn't a great time to start talking to my husband about something he said earlier to me in the day.
Right.
Because he's tired, I'm tired, it's probably going to be emotional and not go well.
Yeah.
So you kind of want to pick a time where things are already calm, people are awake, they aren't overtired from one thing or another, aren't sleepy, hungry, emotional about something else. Especially not emotional about something else. So,
Right.
if Evelyn, for example, were to have a bad day at work and she said something that upset me the day before, I probably don't want to bring that up when I find out that she's had a bad day, because she's probably already emotional.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be beneficial to the conversation.
Right. And that's really kindly considering the other person.
Right. So I tend to wait till I feel like, and then oftentimes I'll just say ahead of time or text ahead of time, hey, I wanted to talk to you about this thing that you said the other day. Could we do it at X time? Because I want to give the other person the option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I'll ask in the moment, hey, could we talk about this thing right now? And if they say no, well, then we're not going to talk about it. If they say, and if that's the case, I would say, well, when can we talk about it? And then try to pick a time later on when they feel like, so if Rochelle was the person and she just got home from work and I said, I wanted to talk to you about X thing. Could we do that? And you're like, no, I'm too tired. I said, well, can we do it after a nap?
Right.
That would be more beneficial to you and ultimately more beneficial to me, because then you're present and you have time to calm yourself down. And, a lot of people get really freaked out when they're like, and I'm one of those who gets freaked out when they're like, I need to talk to you.
Oh, yeah. It's an adrenaline surge.
I'm like, talk to me about what?
Oh, no, I'm in trouble.
It's like going to the principal's office in high school.
Yes.
Yeah. So I try to say what it's about, not just say, I need to talk to you. I try to say, hey, this thing happened. Could we talk about it? And allow the other person to say yes or no. And then when I bring it up, generally speaking, I try to, therapists will tell you to use I statements.
Right.
So that means you're not going, you're such a, and you, the way you said that, and you're like, when you said this thing to me, I felt hurt. I felt angry. I felt this. I felt that. I really don't like it when people talk to me like that. Instead of, you're such a, for doing that thing to me.
Right.
There's a huge difference in how you approach bringing something up, because if you come at someone swinging, I think you said something about that earlier, they're going to automatically be like, why are you attacking me?
Right.
Right. Do you want to vent or do you want to actually solve the problem?
Right. And so I tend to use those I statements as much as I possibly can. Sometimes you can't avoid saying you. It's just not.
Well, yeah.
It's just not possible to avoid that altogether. But as much as you can, talk about how you felt, how you were affected, whatever. And then the other thing that I practice is called reflective listening. I don't know if that's the actual term for it, but reflection is a technique the therapist will teach you. So it tells the other person you heard what they said, and you repeat back to them in your own words what you think they said, which gives them the opportunity to say yes or no, correct you or whatever. So it's something that I do with my husband a lot. I'll listen to what he's saying, I'll pause, and I say, so what you're saying is, and then I'll repeat it, and he'll go, yes or no. Because I'm seeking to understand.
Yes.
Right? To understand why this behavior is going on, whatever. And usually there's some other thing underneath the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, generally, yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's say we're talking about, let's say my son picks up some bad habit, let's say drugs. Now, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a therapist or whatever, but I do know that people don't typically get involved in addiction unless there's a reason why.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's something they're trying to numb.
Yeah.
Often it's trauma. Often it's, some belief they've picked up about themselves. So trying to seek to understand why that even happened to begin with is also part of the process.
Right.
So when I'm confronting the person, I'm not just necessarily talking about the problem, like the addiction, but I'm also trying to figure out what exactly is going on underneath.
Right.
And not to necessarily dig deep into the personal life, but to try to have some empathy.
Right. Yeah.
Because again, it's not about me being right or getting my way. It's about forming some conclusion. Now, if I confronted somebody who was, in an addiction, their addiction is destructive just by itself.
Right.
I may, if I confront them about the addiction itself and they don't want to do anything about it, I may need to set a boundary with that person. I may need to say, you know what, I can't be involved with you.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Or you need to move out or whatever. Even if I know that there's a reason why.
Right.
Right. But if I have some empathy for them and they're like, well, you know what, I just had a really crappy childhood and my mother was this way and my father was that way. And, there's
The context, right?
right.
Yeah.
Then I may be able to be more patient if they're willing to do something about it, understanding where it's coming from.
Right.
So finally, I try to offer a resolution to the person or just talk to them about, well, how could we make this better?
Right.
Yeah.
So that we can come to something that is fair and equitable and beneficial to everybody, because that's the point.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my process, and that's how I've developed that over the years, because I felt like just yelling at people, being a hothead, wasn't getting me anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Early in my marriage, I was, my husband a lot. And I think I was, realizing at some point this isn't getting me anywhere. I need to calm down. I need to develop a way to communicate to him that's actually going to bring about some kind of a resolution, because that's what I wanted.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And to have that reconciliation make things stronger and healthier than they would have been if you hadn't brought it up.
Yeah. And sometimes I go to other people to talk through them, not to report on someone or to gossip, but to get an outside opinion on what happened, because sometimes I'm unclear about how that other person behaved and was that wrong and should I say something. Sometimes I need help with that.
Right.
I don't go to everybody. There's certain people I go to that are helpful to me.
Yeah.
You know, because if I just went around and just like, you know what sounds so said to me,
Right.
you know, that would be gossiping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's just no point to that.
Right.
Yeah, but I do seek counsel sometimes. Sometimes I talk to my therapist. Other times I talk to Fran, my husband. You know, occasionally I'll talk to one of you,
Right.
depending on what it was.
Yeah.
I'm kind of careful about who I talk to about what. And oftentimes, you know, that person's able to give me some feedback and insight that I probably wouldn't have come up with on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do have kind of a limited vocabulary when it comes to insight. I'm trying to work on it, trying to find more insight. Keep reading things, keep examining the Bible, that kind of thing. Getting more, you know, part of my trauma is getting triggered, but not always being clear on why
Yeah.
I was triggered.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't have a good sense for right and wrong
Right.
about certain things, especially the way people treat me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I've had that problem myself, not recognizing bad behavior and with not being intentionally passive, but not really understanding what should my reaction be to the situation.
So, is there anything you guys want to add to what I said? Like, you know, how you would go about confronting someone in terms of bringing something up to someone about something you've experienced, or is there something I missed?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head in all respects. Personally, for myself, I'm not necessarily a hothead, but I am extremely emotional. So in that sense, things can get very unclear for me very quickly because my emotions will tend to supersede any sort of logic that I might need to talk to somebody. So it can take me time to calm down and actually say what I need to say without being super emotional about it. And I've always seen that as a weakness, but it's not a weakness. It's just who I am. I shouldn't say always. I used to see it as a weakness. And I am developing the skill to recognize behavior and when I should confront someone about it. Haven't quite done that yet, not in a big way, but at least I'm starting to recognize when someone's doing something that I don't like. And I have said something to people at work who touched me and they weren't doing anything inappropriate. It just took me by surprise. And then they repeated the behavior. And I'm like, please don't do that. I don't like that. And they did. They stopped. And I did it in a very respectful way. I wasn't mean to them or anything like that. It just made me uncomfortable. And they understood it really quickly. And it wasn't a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me personally, calmness is going to be super important because I get very emotional very quickly. And it makes it hard for me to communicate at times.
Right.
Yeah. I have a tendency to be afraid to say anything. And that fear tends to shut me up and then I procrastinate. And then I see the thing getting worse or at least not getting better. But I think, especially recently, I basically thought, well, I feel afraid. Okay, I feel afraid. But I was able to set the fear aside and just think about the person. Think about what the result that I would like it to be, and just going ahead and being brave.
Yeah. I think that's, going back to reasons people don't, fear of rejection or escalation or whatever you're afraid of. I think, one of the steps you might have to do is overcoming the fear, weighing the benefits and the, what is the benefits and the costs.
Right.
Weighing the two things together. Is this worth talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
And if it is, then you have to work through the fear because the benefit outweighs the cost.
Right.
Which means that the fear is not a reason to not do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't have to say everything exactly right.
Right.
It's going to be okay. And stumbling forward, and I think giving ourselves grace and space to grow in this and realize the more we do it, the better we're going to get.
Right. And, it might be beneficial for you to write down what your points are.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely thought of that. Yeah.
Text it to yourself or, I'm not a list person. I mean, okay, let me rephrase that. I am a list person.
Mm-hmm.
I like lists. I'm not a journaling person.
Right.
I don't like to journal, but I do like to write lists. So oftentimes I'll write myself bullet point lists of things that I want to do or accomplish or say. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't do that on paper or on my phone. If I'm going to talk to somebody, I usually do it in my head. Usually have at least 3 things I want to talk about that are about whatever the problem was. And, I have a list of things that I kind of want to go over. It is helpful to me to have a list.
Right.
Keep me on track. Because I've had many conversations with my husband where I started out talking about one thing and got sidetracked by a side problem.
Yep.
Because it's related, but it's not exactly the problem. And then now we're spending an hour talking about the sidetrack thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm like, we got to get back to the original topic of conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Staying on track is important.
Yeah, very much so.
Right. Right. Because you want to solve the thing.
Right. So if there's nothing else, I think we've pretty much done what we've set out to do. It did take us twice as long as normal.
Yeah.
But we felt this was an important episode. We just want to thank you for listening to this. And if you have someone in your life that you feel would benefit from this, please share it. You can get the link on the platform that you're listening to this on. You can text it to them. You can post it on Facebook, not on Instagram.
Yeah.
If you're on Twitter, you can post the link on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I guess you could do it on TikTok, but that's more of a video platform. It's kind of like Instagram that way.
Yeah.
You unfortunately can't post links on Instagram.
Right.
I think you can post links on TikTok though. So
You can, yeah.
also we have some reels and shorts and whatnot that we're putting out there that are about various topics related to what we're talking about that we're sharing. And if you come across those on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, what was the other one?
X or Twitter.
X or Twitter. Please share those.
Yeah.
They're just short little clips about something to do with safety and, things to think about. We want to help people.
Yeah. And we'd love to know what you think as well. We want to hear about your stories and these things, and
Yeah.
let us know.
If you can relate to what we're saying, let us know. Yeah, we're open to hearing that. So thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great day, and until next time.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for joining us as we discussed such an important topic. We hope you got some food for thought and encouragement to keep going and keep growing. See you later, Bear Club.
Remember to join the Bear Club on our Patreon page for exclusive content. The link is in the description. You can find our podcast on Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.